A lot of us might be new to Xbox Game Pass, and it could be a little bit intimidating with over 500 games. So today, I'll be ranking the 2026 must-play Game Pass games for the average Joe. I stuck with action, adventure, and shooters because I believe those are the easiest games that anybody can get into. So, to start out strong, let's dive in to Resident Evil Village. I've been a fan of this series since I was a kid, and this 8 game hits different from the ones that came before it. Instead of the usual coronavirus outbreak, Village is more metaphysical. Villains with superpowers pulled straight out from Eastern European Transylvania-style folklore. You've got lichens, vampires, and of course, let's not forget Lady Dimitrescu. The first RE villain with a genuine rack, and the one who, let's face it, made this game blow up in sales and in my pants. Spending a lot of your time with her sneaking around, holding your breath, because if she actually catches you, you ain't getting that ass but the claws instead. You play as Ethan Withers, a man trying to find his kidnapped infant daughter through a remote village, fighting off sadistic creatures toying around with you as the last human alive. And I loved every second of it. The game dives into more of that action horror element, and you never know what they're about to put Ethan through next. Level design is linear, almost like an escape room experience. You're going to solve simple puzzles like encountering locked doors, and the keys to them will not be too far when you finish the next checkpoint. And I love that. A well-paced story that just goes bam, 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 and never loses its tension. If you're trapped in a house, you can hear exactly where the enemies are coming from. Hard right, hard left, right behind you, Resident Evil style. It's focused on gore more, and the set pieces and cinematics throw way more action at you than the average Resident Evil game. The finale goes all out. Fast action, boss fights, explosions, and it all comes down to how far a man will go to save his family. This one will get an A tier from me. Up next is Control. Control is totally different from Alan Wake, which comes from the same studio. Instead of a solid trippy story and weak gunplay, Control's story is very predictable, but all the fun is in the power fantasy. You start tossing stuff, flying around, and smashing head-on into bad guys. But here's where it loses me though. That solid combat gets dragged down by a mod and loot system that feels shoehorned into just having loot. Even the most powerful mods barely changed how I play, so I was left with inventory busy work that became a chore. Comparing upgrades, dumping duplicates, managing junk that I really didn't give a shit about. It also didn't help that the same enemies come wave after wave, bullet sponges that drag certain fights on way too long. The story gets you to chase leads, to find your brother, reading documents scattered everywhere, but almost none of that really engaged me. You read a file, then go back to searching. So much of this world only exists in text, and the big narrative questions tend to get answered by a voiceover instead of something I wanted to experience. So the characters never get their moment to shine. The HQ does look incredible, but exploring the same four walls after a while got pretty boring. Now I know some people love this one, but it's gonna get a C tier for me. AtomFall. AtomFall won the 2026 BAFTAs for the Best British Game of the Year, and it was my sleeper hit of 2025. Yes, you can spot the common tropes of a AA title here, and there's a rigidity to the mechanics, but the unique gameplay loop makes up for it. You're dropped into a quarantine zone after a disaster, piecing together clues about what the hell is happening. From the get-go, it's free roam, wherever you want, in whatever order you want. People find it annoying that there isn't a fast travel system, but for me, the way the different regions connect to one another rewards you with just wandering about, uncovering more story, or finding a skill point to level up. You meet a handful of characters, and you get to choose who you align with, who you help, who you avoid, and who you betray. And those decisions actually matter. Not as much as in a game like Fallout, but in a way how different people in different regions behave towards you, or the ending that you're gonna get. My one real complaint here is the stealth, since NPCs are pretty dumb and never much of a challenge, so sneaking around was pretty much child's play for me. This title is definitely not for everyone. The game does not hold your hand, and some have said that the lack of structure became boring. But for me, I loved every second of it. that figuring out your self-discovery was something so unique that you don't find very often. Verdict-wise, this is gonna be a B tier just because I know it's an acquired taste. But if you're like me, it could just be right up your alley. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. You're here for two things, a solid story and nostalgia. This plays like a proper indie film, and I'd put it above the last two indie movies we got. There's a brand new villain, and the story's full of twists and turns, and it carries you across different international locations, from the Vatican to the pyramids of Giza to the Himalayas. Set pieces are the highlight, and the whole thing kicks you off by dropping you inside the iconic Raiders of the Lost Ark temple opening. Getting around these places is a blast too, whipping across gaps, scrambling from a tower onto rooftops, and scaling cliff sides like only Indy can. Troy Baker's performance as Harrison Ford's Indy is downright remarkable. The voice, the mannerisms, he nailed it. You nailed it, Higgs. Where it dips is the gameplay. The core loop is pretty thin, and there are only a few ways to deal with enemies. Throw hands, distract them, or sneak past. And those are the duller stretches. NPCs are dumb, they get baited easily, and you're weirdly hard to spot, even by a dog. None of it's a deal breaker for me though, not for an indie fan who's here for the story and adventure. This one's a B tier. Wolfenstein: The New Order. The original Wolfenstein helped set the stage for first-person shooters as we know them, a classic at this point. The New Order takes that World War II backdrop and asks, what if the Nazis had won the war with advanced technology? You'll battle anything from mechanical dogs to Power Rangers-style Megazords stomping around as pretty much the last man standing in a war. The game leans hard into how evil that world is. Nazis are torturing people on the daily, treating people like human cattle, labor camps, and a deep look into the cruelty of war. I played on normal mode, and for me, it was a hard game. You can't just spray your rounds because you never know how much ammo you'll scavenge before the next fight. I played on normal and still found myself in spots where I stuck swinging a knife. What I kept wanting more was the set pieces, and in between the run and gun, I wish there'd be more cinematic moments, which had so much potential, and when the game wants to test you, they usually just throw you more enemies. Outside of the game being difficult, it just didn't really do anything to push the envelope. It plays pretty much like a lot of other FPS. It's gonna get a C tier for me. Rise of the Tomb Raider. The highlight of Rise is the action. High energy cinematics and a combat that constantly tests your reaction time. Quick time events keeping the pace up and the freedom to swap between different tools mid-fight to keep the energy up. I can see why it's widely considered the best of the Survivor trilogy. And the variety in where it takes you is half the fun. You go from Siberian peaks to crumbling Soviet-era infrastructure to a hidden medieval Byzantine city. You join Lara as she hunts for a tomb her lost father lost his life over, all while going up against a group called Trinity. What I really like is how the story keeps tying these big moments back to her father, a disgraced man who gave up everything for this. So, the stakes are high. Most of the gameplay is diving into tombs and parkour, Assassin's Creed style. The puzzles on the main path are fairly simple, and if you ever get stuck, you can pop your spidey senses or follow Lara's sound cues. But the real fun is in discovering all these hidden pockets of the world. The optional challenge tombs are where the puzzle design really pushes you. And here's what I appreciated about Lara. She's not your modern, unbelievable girl boss who's just good at everything. She knows she's physically weaker than the men hunting her, so she has to outsmart them. She plans ahead, uses the environment, prioritizes stealth over takedowns, and watching the riders let her outmaneuver all those bigger enemies just shows how much more of a badass she is. Now that I've glazed enough on the action the entire time, I will roast one thing about this game. Some parts of the story does get pretty weak. Let's take Jonah for example. He's Lara's closest friend from the last game, somebody who keeps her grounded when her obsession takes over. He's easily one of the most likable people in the entire game, so it kinda bugged me out how little the game does with him. He reminds me of Bill Hader who does 3 minutes and then fucks off the entire movie. They had a great character sitting there, and then he left him on the bench. Overall, Rise of the Tomb Raider gets an A tier. Mass Effect 1. This game basically set a template for all choice-driven RPGs that came after it. The high point for me is how your decisions carry weight. I remember the point I was forced to let one of my own squad mates die, like a manager choosing who to fire during a layoff. And what makes it land even harder is that those choices follow you throughout all 3 games. One of the biggest attempts at that kind of carry over anyone had ever pulled off at that scale. The galaxy feels massive. You piece it together through Codex lore entries on the planets, worlds you can actually drop down into and explore, talking to every NPC I came across just to find out who they were. The combat is where it loses me. Its clunky cover-based shooting turns into a bit of a chore. The AI is not the smartest, and cranking up the difficulty doesn't make enemies any smarter or more dangerous. It just turns them into bullet sponges, so every fight drags longer than it needs to. It got repetitive pretty fast. And stacked against everything else that came out in 2007, like Halo and Gears of War, the combat here doesn't hold. I also did my first playthrough of Mass Effect 1 last year, so to me, the visuals are a bit dated. Pair that with a really long campaign, it definitely did not click with me the way it did for most people. B tier. Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. You play as Senua, a warrior hunted by visions and a chorus of voices in her head, on a brutal journey through Norse mythology. And the presentation is where the game really shines, because I don't think there's an indie studio that delivered graphics as good as Hellblade till today. The facial animation on Senua is detailed, paired with this incredible 360 soundscape and atmosphere. Put on a pair of headphones and the voices in Senua's head move around yours like they're really there. These voices represent Senua's psychosis, and they push you forward as you start piecing together the savage history and trauma in her past, the things that broke her. It plays out almost like an interactive movie, leaning hard into the psychological horror, and by the end, you really feel this young teenager. Gameplay, however, is on the lighter side. They introduce this unique idea of visual puzzles, where you line up the environment until it forms a hidden symbol, but they're pretty weak and not very stimulating. The combat has a limited moveset built around light and heavy attacks, rolls, blocks, and parries, and you'll catch yourself just spamming parry and heavy slashes with bosses. There's only a handful of enemy types reused across roughly the 6-hour campaign, though a few extra moves and enemy variations keep it from getting completely stale. And one thing that wore on me was the backtracking. The game constantly sends you back and forth to areas you've already been just to try to open a door that was closed before. Since this frustrated me a lot, among the other things I just spoke about, not very stimulating, I'm gonna give it a C tier. And lastly, Titanfall 2. Before I get into the game, I must say that this one's a bit of a gaming tragedy. It launched back in 2016 with critical love, and even till today, fans are demanding a sequel. Nearly a decade later, we still haven't gotten one. The thing that hooked me to this game is the movement. The controls are incredible. You feel like you're in control 100% of the time, and that's exactly when I understood why multiplayer gets so competitive, because I can barely process how some of these pros move, flying around over 60 miles an hour. The gunplay is not the best, but it does give you a lot of options, where you experiment with different weapon types to master different environments, not chasing just the best gun. And the Titan combat always makes you feel like every Titan loadout is unique and everyone is a blast. As for who you're fighting, the humans aren't the brightest, rushing you in a predictable fashion, but that's the fun. You're just steamrolling these morons as they come your way. And though it has a short campaign, every level is well designed. The level where you face between the past and the future to conquer different obstacles still stays with me today as one of the best levels I've played in any shooter. And the multiplayer's got some unique moments too. My favorite mode is Frontier Defense, where you and a small squad dig in and hold the line against waves of enemy titans, scrambling between rounds to set up defenses and beef up your loadout before the next wave hits. Titanfall 2 gets an A tier. So, that's the list. I do want to highlight that just because a game's on the C tier doesn't mean it's a bad game. It's just how I rank them against the others on the list. What do you think? Are there any top 10 games that you think should have made the list but isn't there? Or do you disagree with any of the categorization that I just did? Write it down in the comments. It will really help the channel a lot if you like and subscribe and interact with me. I'll read everyone and try to reply everyone. Thanks a lot, guys.